one of my goals, I guess, for the doc is to get the point across that like the people who weren't there or who like weren't into it or didn't really listen kind of like dismiss a lot of this stuff as like adolescent kind of music, mainly because it was being played by young people and it was a young like it was a full on like a youth movement.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. The Last Scene will be the first comprehensive chronicle of what many believe is the last, all caps, underground DIY music scene. One forged in VFW halls and community recreation centers across the United States in the late 90s, early 2000s. This documentary is the story of the punk and emo kids who gave us the last quote-unquote new thing in rock music during an era of change for the music industry and youth culture at large. Kyle Kilday is the one heading up this project, and his objective is to make a feature-length doc that covers about a 10-year period, and he envisions the narrative being organized chronologically into 3 distinct time periods: 97 to 2000, 2001 to 2004, and 2005 to 2007, with a conclusion of where are they now / what's it all mean. When I first started this podcast, it was due to the fact that I wanted to do a documentary about the late 90s, early 2000, but I realized that it would take a lot of fucking money and time to do that. And I thought, how can I create a documentary that wasn't video based? And how could I do it this week? And that was basically the theme with the podcast. It was I could do a podcast and I could talk about it. I like that I get to do this because a movie or a documentary can probably last like 2 or 3 hours and that's it. So you have to give little snippets. And I like that I get to really dive into this. But I am very excited to see this documentary because I do want to visually see what these guys had to say. Like, I want to see what Chris from Saves the Day or Travis from Piebald or Jeff from Thursday or all this huge list of characters that Kyle has filmed for this thing, and he's going to have so much footage after that. So I really hope that when he's done with this, he will put up videos that are long form on a YouTube channel where you could see like an hour-long conversation with him and, like I said, Chris from Saves the Day or Jeff from Thursday and all of the other people that he talks to. I forget how I found out about this documentary. I think it was through Joe Polito's either post in the Facebook group, the North Jersey Pop Punk Facebook group, or his Instagram, but it doesn't really matter because I reached out to Kyle and was like, hey dude, I think that obviously there's synergy here and I want to promote this thing. So why don't I have you on the podcast and have you talk about it? And he said yes, and I got him on the podcast, obviously, because this is his episode. And this is what we talked about. Getting into music because of playing the piano, the band Drexel, Jimmy Eat World's album Clarity, Fred from Taking Back Sunday, how he's setting up the interviews for the documentary, the Kickstarter to get the documentary going, dealing with music licensing, and a shit ton more. Make sure you go check out thelastscenedoc.com, it's DOC, and it gives you more information about the documentary. And I don't know if he's taken any more money for the Kickstarter. I know he surpassed it. He set a goal for 10,000 and he got 14,000. But I'm not 100% sure if he's taken any more money, but I'm pretty sure if he is able to, then, by all means, go support it. This will be the last episode of 2019, so the next one will be launching on January 4th, that Friday. So I'm taking a break, I guess like a week break, so it's not going to be too long. But thank you for everyone who's listened and supported this podcast this year, and since I started in 2018, it's been a lot of fun. I just broke 50,000 downloads since I started in March of 2018, and that's because of everybody listening to multiple episodes or every episode or at least one episode. So I thank all of you, and I thank everyone for their donations this past year, for everyone who's a Patreon, for everyone who's bought merch, for everyone who's bought all the new band merch that I'm selling at thiswasthescene.com, a little plug there. Everyone who's like reached out with messages, everyone who shared this, it's really fucking helpful. I'm looking forward to 2020 because I have a bunch of interviews lined up where it's like some of them like I can't believe that this person said yes. So I'm constantly surprised by how easy it is to reach out to people who I looked up to when I was a teenager, and I get to contact them now and they're like, absolutely. And I'm just like, what the fuck? This is crazy. This is so surreal. So thank you to all of them who are going to be interviewed. Thank you to every single person I've interviewed. And I guess that's the way I'm going to end this intro. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Kyle here has a documentary that he's putting together called The Last Scene. And when I started this podcast, my idea, like, I think I got the idea 5 years ago when I started learning video production. This is actually more than that. It was like 8 years ago. I thought, man, that'd be so cool to document the Jersey scene because I saw a documentary. I think it was like the late like 2007ish maybe. Someone put out, it was like all about hardcore bands. And I bought
Hmm.
it because Lifetime was on. They had all these lists of names, but they mostly interviewed Sick of It All and like H2O and things like that. But this is actually, I think I bought it when it was VHS, and on the cover, Lifetime was just small in the group of bands, so I bought it based on that. And I was like, oh my God, Lifetime's in it. And I think Ari said one thing, and that was it. And I was so pissed. And I thought that would be so cool to do about the Jersey scene. And when I started the podcast, I had said this many times, like, either I can try to do a Kickstarter and raise money and go make this happen, or I asked myself, like, how can I start this tomorrow? And I was like, oh, a podcast, that's way easier because I don't have to travel anywhere. I could talk to people and it can just live on outside of an hour to 2 hour limit. And I can expand on in conversations. And that's why I started this. And then I forget where you posted, but I saw where you're doing. I was like, holy shit, someone finally fucking did it. And you've been putting together this documentary about the late 90s, 2000s punk scene, emo,
Hmm.
post-hardcore scene, and it's just fucking awesome. So we just started talking randomly through Instagram. So I mean, there is the benefit of Instagram because we started
Sure,
having a
yeah.
conversation. But I wanted to talk to you and talk about the doc and just who you're interviewing and like how's it going, what's your vision, and it's going to be a little bit of a break from and get more people who are listening to this podcast to know that this thing's coming out. So the typical structure of the interviews, it's like talking about to bands or people who are in the scene and how like what happened back then. But this is you're doing the same thing, but I'm talking to you who is visualizing what happened back then.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of on the fly structuring this. But let's kind of start from the beginning and talk about you real quick to get people to know who you are and why you're doing this and why the fuck it should be you doing this. Not like saying that from a dick point of view. It's like
Well, no.
like
Yeah,
why
it's
you
true. Like,
love the scene so much and like where that's coming from, because I think if people realize your connection to it, it's just going to add more depth to wanting to see what you're going to have to say with this thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So initially where did you grow up?
I grew up in Connecticut,
Okay.
in a little town next to Waterbury, Connecticut. I was involved in music. I started playing piano when I was 4. The story, as my mom tells the story, I told her like that Christmas, I was like, I want a piano, and she was like, a piano? I'm like, yeah, I want a piano. And then, so then she bought me this like toy piano on Christmas morning. I like opened it up, and then my parents started looking at me, smiling, like expecting me to be like all psyched. And she said that I picked it up and like threw it, and then I started to like to, like scream and cry. And then I said, no, I want a real piano.
What kind of piano was it that they got you? Just like a toy shitty one?
Yeah, like a little, like yeah, toddler piano,
Oh,
basically.
okay. It wasn't like a Casio or like a big electric, like the one
No.
that like James DeWeese uses, like a Moog or
Oh yeah,
A
no. I
Moog,
mean,
Moog.
no, no, definitely not. Like, I can't say that I really like remember this.
Right.
But I'm going by what my mom says. But I mean, this was like the early '80s or whatever. So I doubt it was.
You
I
saw
doubt
a
it was
Flock
like.
of Seagulls
Yeah,
video and you're like,
I was just
I
about to say
need to be as cool as
flock of
that guy.
seagulls. Yeah,
I
a
gotta be
keytar.
I gotta
They
be
got me a
front and center
keytar.
a guitar. Okay,
Yeah.
so
So anyway,
you got into music and
yeah.
then
So I got into music. Like it's weird. It's just something. It's not something that like my parents aren't musicians or anything like that. Apparently, my like great grandfather on my mom's side, I guess would play piano and like teach lessons and stuff. My grandmother told me it wasn't really, I mean, it wasn't like I was in like surrounded by like in a musical family, per se. My parents definitely liked music. They were former slash kind of still are like hippies. So like my dad would just like he had this like great record collection. So I kind of I grew up on like classic rock, like Hendrix and the Beatles and the Who and Led Zeppelin, bands like that,
yeah.
the classics. So I did like private lessons, and I would do like recitals or whatever. But then when I got to school, I wanted to play like in the band, but they wouldn't let me play piano, in like the school band. So I played alto sax in like marching band or whatever. And then in high school, I went to like a private high school. I kind of like picked up like a mentor, like basically this guy who was like the head music program there, and he was like this like great pianist, and he was like very encouraging, and I really like developed my own like musical sense. Like he taught me a lot. He taught me about composing, and so he gave me all these books on like how to compose and like how to like transpose for like different instruments and all that kind of stuff. And I started writing music, and then I wanted to, but like I wanted to play in a rock band. Like I didn't want to be like a concert pianist, because frankly, I mean, I had some talent, but I'm not going to sit here and say that like I was some like musical genius or whatever, right? Like I could play like up to a certain level, but in order to be like a concert pianist or something, like play with a symphony, like you need to be pretty like next level. The like type of training that you need to do is like Russian level, you know what I mean? Like intense, like like person with a ruler is like slapping your hands if you have like the wrong fingering, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I taught myself how to play guitar when I was in like 8th grade. And my piano teacher at the time, he played guitar, and he played in like a cover band type thing, like a funk like cover band. So I like so he'd teach me all these like George Clinton like Parliament songs, which is kind of funny. And then teach me like Who songs. Who's a big Who fan. And then I started writing my own music. And then I had a band in high school, and we actually weren't like a punk band at all. We were like, cause I kind of grew up on like classic rock, I mean, I was into what most kids our age who were into music was into. Like I was into like Green Day and stuff like that, like, Offspring, Rancid, stuff like that. But I wouldn't count that as like the same thing at that point. Cause it's not like, cause that was just mainstream. Right. By then, and they were from, like the Bay Area, which I of course had no connection to. And I hadn't heard of like many other bands of that ilk at the time, but, like alt rock, like 90s alt rock, like stuff like that. Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins. I was big into Chili Peppers.
I didn't like Blood Sugar Sex Magic. I thought that I
didn't.
I didn't like. I mean, I loved the song, the one that broke them. What the fuck is that? Where he's under the bridge. Under the bridge. I like that. There was other songs that I just couldn't fucking stand. Like Suck My Kiss. I thought that was just the stupidest fucking song.
It was stupid.
I think if I listen to the album now, I might appreciate the ones that weren't on TV or on MTV. But I was not like a huge Chili Peppers fan. I like their later stuff, the California stuff. But, like everything is just about California. But I loved the Smashing Pumpkins when I heard Siamese Dream. This is before I got into the whole punk thing. Like with me and my friends, that was like the music and that's why I always ask people what was that aha moment of music where it was, this is what I've been waiting for. And Smashing Pumpkins, like Siamese Dream, beginning to end, it felt full instead of this crap that I felt like I was being cheated by all the other shit that was on MTV. So I loved that grunge era. I thought it was fucking great.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved Alice in Chains. Was one of my favorite bands.
Wood, it's an amazing song. So how did all this lead to you getting into like the punk scene? Because it's like, so it's like, I love the fact that you grew up loving music, and I think that at a certain point, either it works out for some of us that want to be in a band and we do something with it to an extent that it goes all the way, or it stops at some point. But then there's the people that go, all right, well, I want to still do something with this. And then now, I mean, we're not going to just jump to now, but like, currently you're doing this documentary about that time. So it obviously has a piece of your heart that established back then. So like, what got you into the scene, and like, what did that look like? Because I know, so go from there. Yeah. What got you into the scene?
Okay. So after high school, I went to college in Boston, went to Boston University. So this was the fall of 2000. So I had a friend from New Hampshire who I'm still friends with, and he actually lives like 2 miles from me now. Like we both moved here after college to LA. He was into like skate punk. He was into like MXPX, like Lagwagon, Millencolin, stuff like that. There was like a scene up in like New Hampshire. There was like a small scene, kind of like where he grew up, and he had a couple friends who were in some bands. And they used to play in Boston occasionally. He had been going to shows for like the last few years, like in high school, down on like Lansdowne Street, at you know, like the bars or like the Middle East. TT and the Bears was another place we used to go.
Oh, my best friend, she used to work the bar there.
Yeah. So just one day, like he and I kind of like hit it off. We lived in the adjacent rooms in the dorm, and he was like, "You want to go to a concert with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I had like I was lucky, like my parents like took me to concerts. I had been to a bunch of shows even before high school or whatever, and I had like put on like I had played in shows, so I just liked the experience of like going to see live music or whatever, you know. This was like totally different. So we went to the Middle East. So this band, Big D and the Kids Table, now they're like pretty much straight up ska, but at the time they were more like ska punk, I would, you know, like describe it. So they had like elements of kind of like hardcore-ish elements with horns. And so they were playing, and this band, which was kind of a mixture of like them, you know, like half the members were in this other band called Drexel, which I don't know.
Actually, just real quick, when I went to graphic design school, the drummer from Drexel was my teacher.
McWayne. Dave McWayne.
Yeah, it was. I believe it was. I mean, this was like 2004. I forget his full fucking name, but I was like, wait a minute, dude, my band like played. I think we played some shows with them back then, but I totally do that. Yeah.
So, you know, we walk in, we paid like $5 or something. We like walk in, and I'm just like looking around, and I don't know, like there's something, but like everyone was all like kind of like the same age, and it was very obvious that like this had been organized by the actual bands or people like around them. So like it kind of felt like you were walking into basically somebody's garage or something, and like they were putting on a show. Drexel comes out first, and they're just like setting up their own instruments. And so like it kind of like reminded me of, like we used to play shows at like high schools or whatever, and like we would just come out and just like set up and then just, start playing. The difference was like this was at like definitely at like a higher level, and like I mean, they were definitely more of a band, like seasoned band. They had this song called 17, and it was like the first song they played, and they like plug in. We're all just standing, and they're basically just like right in front of us in the same level. Like there's no stage really. I'm standing like right like in front of the the guitarist, and he just starts like he lays into that first like opening riff, and like there's like a shockwave in the room, and I'm just like mesmerized by it. And then they start playing, and it was like it was the first punk show I've been to, and there was just something about it that just kind of like spoke to me, and like that style of music and how it just like moves you, like literally, it literally moves you, like. And then the whole crowd is like moving and like waves. How I've described it before is like popcorn kernels, like in a in a bag, like microwave bag, just like pop, 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 like popping, and like everyone's moving and like rushing towards the stage and like singing along. And you could tell like they literally all like knew each other. And then in subsequent shows, like we would see like the same people, like at all the shows. It was like a community, which I liked. I was hooked from there. And then so like my friend and I we'd go to shows basically every weekend. There's some local bands we'd go see all the time. So there was like Big D and Drexel, and then this other band called Kick in the Head, which was one of my favorite bands at the time, who was also kind of like a ska mixed with hardcore mixed with Jane's Addiction.
Okay.
Yeah, check them out. Kick in the Head. The Goonies were another band. Mac and Isaiah, who later became Wilhelm Scream.
Yeah, I just interviewed Nuno.
And then like occasionally we'd see like a hardcore band like Bane. Like they would play with them or something, and that was a different experience too. Like I'd never been like a hardcore show. So as far as like what spoke to me, I mean, everyone was there for the music. And this was before you could be distracted by a phone or like anything like that. Just like everyone was there for the music, and they knew all the songs, and everyone like sang along, and you could tell it was just like a collective release for people.
Yeah.
I also just like I really like aggressive music. Like people hear that and they like automatically think, like, oh, so you like, like Slipknot or whatever. But like I've always liked aggressive music in like any form. Like for example, like when I first heard Dashboard, like his first album,
Extremely aggressive.
very aggressive, but to someone who like wasn't really paying attention, like you just hear it and be like, it's just a dude who's a guitar, like, and he has a high voice. But if you actually like listen to it and listen to the words, and I mean, obviously he screams or whatever. I just like music that was like very raw, like emotionally, and I can't call myself straight edge or anything like that because I definitely wasn't. I was, I guess, to a degree. Like I never identified as straight edge, but I always disliked music that, and the people who like quote unquote liked them, that it was just an excuse to like party.
Okay.
And that really like bothered me. For that reason, like I never liked the Strokes because it was very apparent that it was just like an excuse to like be to just go party and like do drugs or whatever for like everyone I know who like the Strokes pretty much. And the band themselves. And like that whole like scene, that like Brooklyn like post-punk revival thing. I really like the fact that like you were there. There wasn't like a lot of drinking or any drugs that I could see, and kids like literally went to like watch the bands and like give their complete attention to these bands on stage and just like get out whatever they had to get out, for like an hour or two, and then and then just go home. I like that feeling of just being there with a bunch of people and like having that experience, having that like live experience,
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like
So
the drinking part of it at a show would just be people were just not there connecting. And it's like when we would
yeah,
go to hall shows, we were all there exactly to see that band and then be in the crowd. And somehow the band was playing and we'd be singing the songs back, but they would notice that. And there was this, we're all here together, but that would be missing if people were there smoking up or drinking. And it seemed like you were like, you're missing the point.
yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Yeah. So that kind of like exchanged how I started to experience music, and then that's when I got really into like underground type stuff, like DIY stuff. So like Blossom had like some great bands, but then of course I started to get into like the bands from New Jersey and like Long Island, and
Which
you know
which Jersey bands were you a fan of?
I really liked Midtown.
Yeah.
Of course, Saves the Day. New Jersey. Who else? Let's see. Lane Meyer was no.
You're like, I didn't hear your
I
band until you reached out.
definitely I've 100% seen you, like especially if you guys ever played Skate Fest in Worcester.
I don't
They
think
used to have like a
I did.
thing where there were like like 50 bands or whatever.
Oh, that's like every show.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to any
Thursday.
shows? Yeah, Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. Yeah, Thursday because they when did they start? In like 99, 98?
Yeah, their first album came out in '99. So yeah, I mean, like around then. I mean, I interviewed Jeff. He started out like kind of like a promoter in a sense first, where he would like throw show. He would put on shows because he would like go to shows in basements there.
Yeah.
Like the Bouncing Souls and like bands like that, like a little bit, before like that, like wave, like right before that continued at the same time for the beginning of it, but that like transition wave of bands like Bouncing Souls, H2O, you could count like Lifetime in that group, kind of because they were so like influential. Yeah, I was really into. I love that band, The Strider. Do you remember
Yep.
them?
Yeah, yeah.
That's not Jersey, but Long Island.
Yeah,
And
Long
Movie Life. I was really into Movie Life too. We somehow like found out about some of the California bands, like basically based off of like CD samplers, and like the internet had become a thing by then. So we would like download stuff, and that's kind of how we found out about like Homegrown and like bands like that.
I used to love Homegrown.
Yeah.
Yeah, the album they put out where they're all like old men on the cover. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, Act Your Age.
Yeah, I loved that album. I don't know.
Yeah.
My friends made fun of me for it. They're like, "This band's awful." I was like, "This band's great." And what
Yeah.
are you talking about? It's fucking amazing.
um, yeah, so yeah, like that's kind of how I got into it. And then it's kind of hard, like I guess I should work on kind of a more succinct explanation, but why I liked it, or whatever. But that's basically it. Like as someone who was like into music, it was just like I stumbled in, like I discovered basically a world where music was literally like these people's lives, and it was a community that was. I love the fact that it was like they let the bands controlled it, like like especially like then.
Mm.
As it grew, that started to not be as much of the case, obviously, and they got signed to labels and all that. But
Your contribution to this though was you weren't playing in a band at the time because you were in school, but you would go to a lot of shows. Like, did you ever put on shows or anything like that?
no, no, I never put on shows.
Not saying it's like, not
A,
saying that's
a,
a negative
a
thing.
spectator.
Yeah, but you like, I'm just, you had a real passion for it. So did you go to like a lot of shows where it was like every weekend, or was
Yeah,
that like the thing you did?
it was basically our social activity, and then we met some other kids who from BU who were also into it, and then like we would kind of like hang out with them on the outside, if you will, and we'd all kind of go together, and that was fun, because it was almost like in a weird sense, it's kind of like how to phrase this, something that I wanted to like talk about on the doc that like just kind of a quirky thing that I think people don't know were like the ties between like Christian kind of people and like hardcore especially, and then like Christian punk, right?
Yeah.
Like like MXPX was identified, like anyone who's on Tooth and Nail, like if
Yeah.
you were signed to Tooth and Nail, you were just labeled as like a Christian band. And like interviewing, like I interviewed John Tran from Homegrown,
Oh,
and
nice.
and he told me
Speaking of
like they went on this tour once, and like they weren't a Christian band, but
no.
Adam, the bass player, like who is a pastor now, actually, he's like a pastor of a church in Orange County. John was like, yeah, like he was always like religious, like he was into like Christian hardcore, and he would take him to like hardcore shows when they were in high school and stuff. So there's this like weird like if you identify as like a Christian person, you're not going to go out like partying or whatever. So you kind of like have these frustrations and like urges or whatever. So it's, I guess, a good way to like release them is to play like really hard, like aggressive music. You know what I mean? Like
Interesting.
then of course, like it became kind of like a marketing tool or whatever for whoever used to put on like the Christian tours. But anyway, so like John was saying they used to have like these like tours that they would tour like the Bible Belt or whatever, and it would be like a bunch of Christian bands or whatever, and all you had to be, I guess, was just on Tooth and Nail, like, and then you were kind of like considered a Christian band, even if maybe like you weren't super Christy. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Super Christy.
Because
Super into the G's.
because John's like, we definitely were not like straight edge at all, and we'd be like drinking beers, and they would like come by like backstage. He said the like promoters or the like tour organizers, and be like, okay, so when like you can't swear, like when like you go on stage or like, anything like that. He said it was weird, but it became like a thing because straight edge is like almost like people can take it to kind of a religious extreme,
Pretty much.
like for sure. Look, I admire people. Like I wish I didn't want to have a beer, like once in a while. You know what I mean? Like I'm from New England. Like we definitely have like this like legacy of like puritanical attitudes towards like drinking and like
Yeah.
like partying or whatever. So like it's in there. So I always kind of like admired that. But anyway, this is very long-winded. I'm sorry. We go to these shows and it was like a community, and it was almost like just the experience was like so intense that it was kind of like going to like some kind of like like pseudo religious experience, not to be too hyperbolic, but the experience of like the release and the cathartic element of it and like the shared experience. It was like it was a weekly thing we did with a bunch of people that we knew in the community, and we would go and like have this experience. And for me, like personally, I'm one of those people who, like if I go to the symphony, for example, I'll actually get like I'll get like butterflies in my stomach, and like I'll be genuinely moved, by music,
So you have like a real passion for music, and it carried into the punk scene, or the late '90s punk emo hardcore scene.
Yeah.
That you have this thing that already exists that you really enjoy, and then that was the thing where you're like, this brings that thing out of me, and I get
Yes.
to really enjoy it. And I think that also sounds like why you didn't want to drink when you were going there, because you're like, well, that's gonna dull it down. I want to really be in the moment and feel this shit.
Yeah. And I didn't like, it's funny, like I then like adopted this stance or whatever, I guess, where like I like refused even when I turned 21 or whatever. And like I said, I was not straight edge. Like I drank. I would like when I went to shows, I would not drink because I remember thinking to myself like I want to remember and like truly experience every moment of this,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, so like yeah, like that became a thing for me.
So how long ago did you get? Because I really want to dig into the doc. I have so many. I just like busted out like a bunch of questions in front of me
Oh, all
that I'm
right.
so fascinated by this. Because when you graduated college, it sounds like up until this point you would still go and see bands. Like that's never really dwindled.
Okay, so I went for film and TV, so that's kind of like the beginning of that. We'll get into that. I graduated and then I moved here and then I started working in like reality TV, like cable TV. So, but like the whole time, like yeah, like I've been like I like continued going to shows. And then around like 2009, the like anniversary stuff, like the anniversary show thing started.
Yeah, where everyone was getting back together and having all the
Yeah.
reunions.
Yeah. So I remember going to see like Taking Back Sunday in like 2007. And like by then, or like My Chemical Romance, I saw My Chemical Romance. They like kind of like headlined this like tour. I think it was in that year, 2007. So, like there were some of the same bands still out there, but it definitely felt like it had kind of like come and gone. Not literally come and gone because a lot of the bands are still out there. They continue. Take Back Sundays out there. They have new records. Newfound Glories put out new records.
Yeah, but the same excitement from the
Yes,
beginning,
but it's different,
it's
obviously.
totally different, right?
Yeah. Times change, the circumstances change, like they're not playing hall shows. But like we'd go, but I remember feeling like that was kind of over in a sense. That era, that like moment had passed.
Right.
But then like 2009, the like anniversary show thing started. I remember going to see 15-year or no 20-year anniversary of Clarity. No, 10-year, sorry.
10-year.
Yeah, yeah, 10-year Jimmy Eat World.
Yeah.
Uh,
I remember that tour.
and
That's when they toured with No Knife, right? I think they did.
maybe I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I remember going to see that and being like, oh yeah, I remember this record, like like a great seminal record. They broke on their next record, Bleed American. Almost everybody that I interview, for this like cites Clarity as like a huge moment or whatever. For them like a watershed.
It doesn't sound like it was for you.
No. That's
You're
just
very like, yeah, this fucking album came out,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean,
No.
definitely, like there's a couple bands you've mentioned where I'm like, yeah, I just never got into them. But like, yeah, there's bands that people really were like, holy shit, and so sometimes I'm like, I don't get it. I mean, I definitely loved Clarity, but it sounds like
Mhm.
you kind of have that with that album.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. I was definitely Jimmy Eat World was one of those bands that I definitely like came to appreciate more as I got older
Hmm.
versus at the time. Like at the time,
Really?
yeah, I was I
Interesting.
was I was very much into like more punk sounding, like faster, louder, more aggressive type stuff
Yeah.
than the more like introspective,
Pussy Rock.
nuanced emo kind of thing. Yeah, even though like Clarity isn't like exactly, but like I wasn't doing that like the same reason like the Juliana Theory is like another band and I interviewed Brett and Josh from Juliana Theory. they're another band that I like at the time I definitely would not have been into, but over time I got more into them, like the more like I matured. So like it's funny, like basically like one of my goals, I guess, for the doc is to get the point across that like the people who weren't there or who like weren't into it or didn't really listen kind of like dismiss a lot of this stuff as like adolescent kind of music. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
like mainly because it was being played by young people and it was a young like it was a full on like a youth movement. But the level of maturity though in like the music and like the lyrics for like a lot of these bands was like better than most, like a lot of classic rock songs, like
That's
you
a
know what I mean?
really good fuck. I never thought about that. Like, you're right. I mean, Christ saves the day. I mean, Chris was what, 14 or 16 when he wrote "Can't Slow Down,"
Yeah,
and when "Through Being Cool" came out, it was really well put together. But these were young kids doing that. But now, and I'll let you get back to your point, but like what I've noticed now is when I hear newer bands like writing these songs, I look at maybe the same way people looked at the stuff we were doing, but I mean, I legit like I can pick out good lyrics or there's essence and or substance to it, but I what I've
mhm,
seen now is what's coming out. I'm like, this is shit. Like not all of it. I mean, there's a
yeah,
lot of underground bands that are good, but some of the stuff that's in your face, I'm going, this is the biggest crap. Like there's nothing behind what they're saying. But yeah, like back then, like the people had a really good way to construct like lyrics and
yeah.
songs, and we were super young.
Yeah, it wasn't banal trash, basically. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I actually like don't have much respect for most current music from like a art or even from like a well, yeah, from like an artistic standpoint. Like most everything that most people like that gets to most people's ears now is pop music, and pop music has basically just become a machine. Like like it's a machine that, and it's songwriters. People don't write their own songs. It was like kind of funny. Like I interviewed Fred Mascherino from Breaking Pangea, Taking Back Sunday. Color Fred is his
Yep.
like his like solo band,
Yeah.
and I actually asked him like, was it even in the realm of possibility that you guys would like have somebody else like do a song that like somebody else wrote? And he had like his like visceral reaction, like he was like at the thought of that, like visceral disgust at the thought of like singing someone else's song.
Like where someone was a songwriter and they sold him
Yes,
the lyrics and he sang it.
yeah,
Yeah, there is that bands who are big into writing lyrics, there is that fuck no, I'd rather run into traffic, like
yeah,
oncoming traffic than to have someone write a song for me. But then there's also like Fits and the Tantrums where they do collaborate. When I was like, that's interesting to me, but they're going for hits. But there's other bands that are, this is salt of the earth. We need to do this. But at the same time, then but there's the internal songwriters like Newfound Glory.
hmm,
Jordan doesn't write any lyrics. It was
right,
Chad, and then like when Steve was in the band, like he would write it.
yeah.
But yeah, but at least it was internally instead of
Well,
this
yeah, yeah. No, no, I don't
label.
count that. I mean, like outside the band,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
you know, like would you let the label
Fuck no. I wouldn't even
tell
let you
you
finish that sentence. Fuck no.
we're gonna bring in like so and so, he's real hot right now, he's written, he wrote this and whatever, and then he almost like threw up like in the chair
Yeah.
like when I said that. And so yeah, so there's like an element of that, and as it turns out, like rock music, and this is also part of the full, like if I'm gonna do like the full story, I'm gonna get into this like kind of like the aftermath, like what's happened since. Rock music is definitely like back, quality rock music in most ways, kind of like back underground right
Yeah.
now. Like you're not gonna hear it on like the radio. Like even if you put on like K Rock, they're not playing like they play like I heard fucking like Post Malone on like K Rock. I'm like, really? Like you can't find a rock band, and if they play rock, they're like playing The Offspring, which is 25 years old at this point, and it's like,
It's classic rock now, which is crazy.
yeah,
The problem is when things are too mainstream, like when this whole podcast is about the late 90s into the early 2000s, just like your doc.
hmm,
And that's when it was starting to get more exposed. At the same time, we were still going to Legion Hall shows or small club shows and seeing these bands play instead of going to these giant stadiums and these giant venues to see these bands play. And
Yeah.
the problem is when you take an idea that underground, where it's not in the media, it's not in front of everybody, that's doing well. When you take something that already has established some kind of thing and you put that mainstream, the problem with mainstream is that, like we were talking about before with Instagram, it is just how quickly can I consume this and how quickly can I get over this? And that's what
Hmm.
happens when it goes mainstream. It's everyone just goes, yeah, and they gravitate and it just the bubble bursts and then everyone's like, all right, what's next? But in the
Yeah.
underground scene, we were going, no, that was not. We weren't just looking to consume this. We were looking to fucking live this shit. And I think that's why it's sustained, and that's why it went back underground because the bubble burst. But the purists, in a really strong way to say this, stuck with it because we were like, well, this is what our foundation is.
Hmm.
We're not just
Yeah.
like parasites going, what's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah. 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 One of the themes I want to explore is like, like you just said, to just borrow like your phrasing, like they're just consumers and music is just entertainment.
Yes.
Whereas music for these kids who were there during this, I mean, it was basically a way of life.
Yeah. No,
You
that's
know
a
what I mean?
great way to put
Like
that.
that sound, some people might like roll their eyes at that, but it's
No,
true.
I
Like this
totally
was,
agree. It was helping you find yourself, really. Like,
yeah.
and you'd attach it to it. That's why you can hear a song now from back then, and it just transports you back to when you were a certain age listening to that, and you can remember a moment of, "Oh, I was driving in my car, like I could be like, I was driving in my '86 Volvo, like going to Hoboken with my friends when it was 1,000 degrees outside, and going to see Less Than Jake because this song was on the radio." It's like really can take you back, to transport you back to those moments, and like you're like,
Hmm.
yeah, this is what formed me.
It's just so weird. Like there's so much to just kind of like to play with, and like thematically, it's like that I'm going to do the best I can. But this was like simultaneously the soundtrack for like our generation, right?
Yeah.
But also just like there were so many people who were like unaware that it was unaware of that. Because like a lot of these songs ended up in like on soundtracks in movies and popular culture, like you heard it. Obviously there were like Fall Out Boy became a huge band, or like Yellow Card, or bands like that. New Found Glory, they managed to like to straddle the mainstream, being mainstream but also like being
Underground.
part of the scene.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because they started in the scene and then they graduated. They kind of dipped their, how do I say this? They kind of, if there was a line between where they were standing in the scene and the line over to mainstream, it's like, you're right. They just stepped their right foot over, but they kept their left foot on the scene side. I
Hmm.
mean, I think Fall Out Boy, they extremely just all jumped over to the other side, and they were like, "Yeah, the scene was cool." I mean, there are roots, and I think with Pete Wentz, he'll talk about bands from what made him love music, and I think that's might be the thing that keeps his left foot in there. But
Hmm.
they like really went on the other side, which God bless them, they fucking made that happen.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like that's another thing too. It's like that I found from the interviews I've done about like 18 interviews now, I think. Unlike previous generations, like waves of hardcore and like punk bands, these artists didn't like disown anybody for having success. It was much more like previous generations, they would have like cut off their left arm than than like have a song on the radio or whatever, or you would be like ostracized if you licensed your song to a commercial, or or whatever. There was definitely like there was a recognition on this, and whether it was the way that business was changing, during that time, which is kind of like the whole backdrop of the doc, right? Like for everything, there's like a context, there's like a backdrop of like the broader, like what's going on. And in this case, it's, that the music industry was undergoing like a great upheaval and like reorganization based around technology and the internet and like all that kind of stuff. Deregulation too is like a big thing. I
What do you
probably
mean?
won't get like, hmm?
What do you mean?
So like so in 1996, Congress passed the Telecommunications Act. It says right there like the goal of this new law is to let anyone enter any communication business to let any communication business compete in any market against any other. So I need to like do some more research before I like incorporate this into Doc, obviously.
Is it basically saying like this is why MCA was able to gobble up all these smaller labels and add them to their list, or it's basically this is trying to make that not happen?
The like consensus is it basically like changed the business end of it to like every other business, things just started to become more and more like a bottom line type of thing, right? And it allowed like the big players to acquire and consolidate and then therefore control more of the industry, like of the landscape.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
then so like radio stations were all owned by the same company and they all had the same format. And if they decided they didn't want to play rock music anymore, they didn't play rock. They didn't play rock music anymore. And then it became more and more business-like because they were losing money from record sales, and they needed to like come up with new ways to like ensure they made money. It's like what's happened with retail, with banking, with like all kinds of stuff. Things are just changed. They're like anti-choice, right? Like if you have something interesting or experimental to that, like you want to make, like good luck trying to get on Warner Brothers records.
yeah, but at the same time, the thing I like about when I tell people about this podcast, because they'll say, "What do you do?" Because I work at a co-working space, and my main thing is doing like animation freelance shit, and I'll be doing that in the day, and someone comes up and I see the sticker on my computer, or I wear a button that says this was the scene, and they're like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, it's my punk podcast about the late '90s scene," and either they're going, "That's awesome. Where do I find this?" Or they go,
Hmm.
"Oh." I go, "Yeah, that right there is why I love this because it's so niche down that I'm not looking to have the masses know about this. It's the
Right.
specific people who like it." So I think there is a power to that. And when people were like, "Oh, this company's creating this thing," it's like, well, all it is just a switch of a channel, or you deciding to just do a little bit more research to find the shit that you like instead of being
Mhm.
like a fucking robot and going, well, that's what, back in the day, it's like, well, that's on MTV. That's what we're listening to. It's like, well,
Right.
that's what we were all going, no, that just seems like you're just kind of giving up.
Right. Yeah.
How did you finally get the like from going from, hey man, like one day you had an idea, go, I want to do a documentary about that error, and then what did the day look like where you go, you know what, I'm fucking doing this?
It was, I guess it was probably like two years ago, about 2 years ago now. I had just come off a job that ended, and then at this point, I had been to several of these anniversary shows that I referenced earlier. I saw all these people there, like mostly people like our age, like like they did that for us. They didn't really do it to like get new fans, I don't think, or at least that's not what happened from what I saw, which is fine. Like it was like a commemorative event. I work like freelance, so my jobs usually last like 8 or 9 months on average, and then I'll have some time off usually, like maybe like a couple months. So I remember thinking, because my job ended, and then we were expecting my second child, and I was not working, and I was like, okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity to finally get going on this, right? Because I had some free time, and so I kind of started like put it together then. And originally, I was envisioning it as like a kind of like an 8-part travel series
That's cool.
where like with a host, and they would go to New Jersey, Long Island, Boston, Chicago area, Orange County, whatever, South Florida, kind of like the hubs of where the scene happened, where they started and like where like it grew organically on its own. And they would go and they would talk to people there and like go to like the local venues or whatever, and try to talk to people who used to run shows and stuff like that. I put together like a whole thing, like whole like presentation. A friend of mine who's a line producer made like a sample budget or whatever, and then I started to like pitch it. The like irony is that like MTV, this isn't something that they would ever air, which is funny, right?
Really?
To think about, they would never air that. I remember like I went to the Fuse network, and I like pitched it to them, and they were like, honestly, if it's not about hip hop, we don't like, then like we're not interested. Sorry. That's like literally what they said to me.
Wow.
So I was like, okay. So then I was like, well, I'm gonna have to just like do this on my own, I guess, or like try to find a wealthy benefactor who will just give me money, I guess, to do it. So then basically like it became it got like pared down like, all right, so I'll pitch it as like a standalone like feature length documentary, and then I'll put it together, and then I'll do like a crowdfunding, right? So then I cut together some sizzles or whatever, and which you've seen, and I ran the Kickstarter a couple months ago, and we made it.
Wait, you did a couple months ago? I thought you've done 18 interviews in a couple months?
Oh, no. Oh, no. No. Oh, sorry. I'll back up. So then while I'm, figuring out like how I'm going to make it or whatever, like how I'm going to finance it, all that stuff, I just started reaching out to people on like Facebook.
Yeah.
Or I had made a couple connections with people who kind of like started to help me like get in touch with this person and that person. My first interview was with Fred from Taking Back Sunday, and he happened to be out here doing some like emo night stuff in like San Diego and Orange County. He was like, yeah, just come down, like we can do it in my hotel room. And so then I'm like, all right, fine. So then I went with like a friend of mine who had camera equipment and also is into the whole scene. He grew up out here, so he was more into like skate punk type stuff. So I just started doing interviews kind of like on my own, kind of like in my free, like on weekends or whatever. And then eventually it got to the point where I was meeting enough people and I was getting like enough of like awareness that I started to realize that like, okay, I can actually do this. At that point, I got hooked up with through a friend of mine who's a producer in TV. He's like, hey, I know this guy named Steve who I did a show with like a little while ago. He like runs this company that like helps people crowdfund. So I'm like, oh, okay. And like he was in a band, like Punchline, like you heard, I'm like, oh yeah, Punchline, I heard Punchline.
Punchline,
So
Punchline.
Steve,
Why am I not knowing this band?
they're from Pittsburgh. They started around then, like late '90s, but they didn't actually like really get that well known until a little bit later. Like they kept going, and they're still a band now, and they're coming out with records. They kind of like got known kind of more towards the end of this era, I'd say.
Okay.
But they were definitely around. They had like a release in 2005, I think was their first record.
It's like one of those bands where as soon as the interview is done, I'm gonna go, oh, fucking that band, yeah.
Yeah. So it's Steve Sabosley is like the guy who my friend was like recommending me to. He's the lead singer and guitar player. So I like emailed him and I was like, hey, like I'm looking to make this doc. Like it's basically about you. Would you like to help me out or whatever? And he was like, yeah. So then I got hooked up with them. They have a crowdfunding company called Enjoy Craft Services. So we did a Kickstarter, kind of like developed it. There was this whole stage where they were like, okay, like you need to build up like an email list and like build up followers and like be posting stuff on like social media and stuff. That was the hardest thing about it for me, was like that end of it, because I'm just like not good at that. I'm not like a social media person. That was tough. But with their help, I was able to, and like the help of some of the people who I interviewed, like really helped me out. Like Shane Told from Silverstein.
Yeah.
He like did a lot. Like he's like responsible for like a lot of my donations probably. Just from like posts that he did, and he gave me a shout on
Lead Singer
his
Syndrome.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris Number 2 from Andy Flag is another one. He did a lot of posting for me as well. I mean, most of the guys that I interviewed helped me out with by doing posts and like sharing the link and stuff. We made it. We got enough money to meet my goal. We raised about $14,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like when I was talking to people about this back in the day, I said, when I thought about if I was gonna do something like this, I was like, this would have to be at a minimum $5,000, and I was like probably around like 10,000 to do this, and I was like, and that even sounds really light because of just the time, the hours of editing, but the travel, setting up all the equipment, bringing the equipment, interviewing someone for a couple hours, like it's at the end of the day, like if it's $14,000, if that's the max, I mean, take that and divided by how many hours you're probably gonna put into it. So if people ever come to you and say like, oh, that's a lot of money, you'd be like, I'm making about 20 cents an hour right now.
Yeah,
doing this shit.
I'm not making any money.
Yeah, this is all going to just make this thing happen.
Yeah, have no illusions. Like I'm not pocketing like $8,000 of that or something, and then like in the like complete opposite. I set up a company, a production company. It's all like going through there, and it's just basically just being spent. And yeah, so basically, I've like mapped it out. It's like, frankly speaking, it's nowhere near enough money
Yeah.
um to like do something that you would see like released in the theater with licensed music, right?
Oh
The
yeah.
challenge, the challenge isn't getting the interviews at this point, because at this point, through the crowdfunding and everything, and just like the awareness that it's gotten in the community, which is like awesome. Like it's been really cool to just have it be confirmed that like this really was a community, and like everyone does kind of like know each other. Everyone's like at minimum like an acquaintance, and there's like some real genuine friendships between the artists, and it's like they really believed in what they did, like what they're still doing. That's been like a privilege to like be witness to, you know. I'm basically going to use the money on production, and I'm going to save a little bit for like finishing, and maybe do like some custom scoring,
Oh wow.
if I get that, in lieu of trying to use, you know, a Fall Out Boy song, which I couldn't afford unless they just decided to you know, they're like, you know what, we like what you're doing. You know, like you can use
Here
it
you
for free.
go. Yeah, that's like the technical stuff I didn't realize because like what's the final medium you want this to go on? Is it just gonna launch on YouTube? Are you gonna try to get a theater to play it? Like where's this gonna go?
Yeah, like as far as a theater goes, I would say if we could do like because there are like exceptions you can get for like a theatrical exhibition. If you say like, okay, well, I'm gonna have like a series of events, basically like here, and here, and I'd like to be able to
Show
use
up and put
this
this in
or
your
whatever, like,
projector.
and
Yeah.
then, you know, on that night, like on these nights or whatever, for that 2 hours for whoever's there. That's like a separate legal consideration versus like if like AMC was gonna, you know, put it in their theaters, you know what I mean? Or if you were gonna release it on DVD and you know, like sell it or whatever.
You know what? I mean, this I don't know how big it is. You know Alamo Drafthouse?
Yeah,
Do you think they're like they seem to be really into I don't know, maybe they're into independent stuff. That for some reason that to me seems like a place that they would play this. I don't know if they're
yeah.
just like bigger, but like that place is awesome. I feel like I would
They just
see it
opened
there.
one here.
They're so fucking great.
Yeah.
They're so amazing. Yeah, it's like I mean obviously you gotta like get the whole thing together. I'm just like trying to
Yeah.
everyone's gonna give you fucking advice or unsolicited advice. I'm just like you're like,
All right,
great, I
Mike.
got
What do you go ahead?
I just always think about it. I'm just trying to like I'm trying to think of myself like would I drive to a theater and see this documentary? I'm like, yeah, I totally fucking would.
The one thing that I'm concerned with, the two elements that we problematic are trying to use a song. Like if I wanted to use, you know, "Sugar We're Going Down" or like
Yeah.
"I'm Not Okay," right, in like the main titles or whatever, like, you know, of the movie, or if I wanted to use a clip of like somebody playing on Conan, like, you know, playing live on Conan or something that's like
Yeah.
owned by NBC or whatever. Those are the two types of materials that I'll probably have to steer clear of, unfortunately. But I can get around that because the doc is going to rely on home video,
Yeah.
essentially, that people took, or maybe like a venue took, like that venue, Ace's Basement in North Carolina. I'm not sure where it is, like Greensboro, North Carolina. I think it's gone now,
Okay.
but like they used to have a lot of shows. Like it was like a scene stop, if you will, on like when bands would tour like the Southeast. I think they used to just like record every show, and then somebody has them all, because I remember Ben from Armor for Sleep, Ben Jorgensen,
Yep.
another New Jersey band. He like sent me this video that somebody from that place was like, here's one of your sets from 2005 or whatever.
So you have you gotten in contact with Joe Polito?
No.
Okay, so Joe Polito, I think he might have been the guy that gave you that saying you that. He a couple years ago, he created an archive. It's called the NJPP archive, and it
Okay.
it
Yeah. Yeah.
has demos like A to Z from every Jersey band, pretty much from back then that were like bands that no one ever even heard of.
Hmm.
And he has so much footage from bands. Like, he just posted a bunch of shit and like photos and stuff. You should definitely connect with him because he is probably that piece that'll have all of these things, a lot of these things you're looking for.
Mm. Yeah. 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 Totally. Yes. I know what you're talking about. Like I've seen him. I follow him on Instagram apparently.
I think that's how I heard about your doc. I think he posted it because he posted, and we have a Facebook group called the North Jersey Pop Punk Group, and this is
Mhm.
where this whole thing started. And like everyone will post, everyone posts like stickers, flyers, patches,
Mhm.
releases, shirts, and shit like that in there. And I think he had posted a link to your teaser in there.
Mhm.
And that's how we got.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that's how we got. That's how I knew about it.
Shit gets around. Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm not really worried about getting archival in that sense because just go to YouTube and just like search like saves the day at the Fireside Bowl 1998 and like it'll come up with like somebody had a VHS recorder basically and like
Yeah,
recorded the show. And then I could just like get in touch with that person. And as long as they clear it,
that's
you
true.
know, I've gotten a release from Chris or whatever. So he hasn't, like he's fine with it. So I could use stuff like that. I might not be able to use the audio depending or, whatever. Like, I mean, basically like I'm envisioning something that's going to be primarily like, getting it on like a streaming, platform.
With the interviews, because I'm scrolling through the Instagram that you have right now, and if
Hmm.
anyone listening, you should go check out the Last Scene Doc. That's his Instagram, DOC. Has there been someone you've interviewed where you were like, I can't believe this is happening right now?
um, I can't believe this. Well, here's what's funny. Before, like, there have been interviews where, like, beforehand, I was nervous, right? Like, I felt nervous, and it's usually been the ones where it's been like more official seeming, right? More like organized. Like, for example, I went last weekend to go interview Matt Watson, Kenny Vasoli from
Hmm.
Starting Line.
Yeah.
We went to Denver, which was cool. Never been to Denver, great city. And so like I set it up through like their manager. There was like it was very like organized and professional seeming. So like for those, I always get kind of like a little bit of nerves beforehand because I don't want to seem like unprofessional or like we're not like a real crew or whatever. But then like as soon as we get there though, it's like as soon as they sit down and we start talking, it's like that just kind of goes away. Like it feels it feels great to talk to these people and people who like I've been listening to their music for like 20 years and it's just great to meet them and it's crazy because like in that scenario you imagine like you're going to interview like Bruce Springsteen or something, right? And he's like older than you and like has all this wisdom and then but no, it's like you're pretty much the same age and like like you're pretty similar. Like the profile for all these people, it's like where they came from, like where they grew up. They're all kind of from the same area, and like it's people just like you that like went to your high school or whatever. Except they're musicians who write songs and like play shows. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Like who was I interviewing? Who I was like, holy shit. Well, I mean Chris, Chris Conley for sure. Like
Yeah.
we met him at the observatory in Santa Ana, which is like a venue in Santa Ana, California. That was another one where like went through their management and then like the tour manager and stuff, and like we coordinated and we showed up and like driving down there, like I was like a little nervous or whatever because whenever I get like a someone like that who I really want to get a lot of stuff from and who's basically like a main character, if you will, in my narrative or whatever, I want to make sure that I don't fuck it up, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to forget to ask something or like not be on top of my shit or whatever, not have my questions in a row, not be listening, not ask good follow ups. There's a little bit of nerves, and then like we go up there, we're in the green room, and we're waiting for him to come in, and we're just like sitting there, like we've set up, we're waiting for him to come in, and then he walked in. I definitely had a moment of like, holy shit, I'm standing next to Chris Conley right now, and I'm shaking his hand, and like he walks in, and it's like so casual. He's like, "Hey, I'm Chris." That's like what he said, and I'm like, I know.
He's like, "Hi, I'm Mr. Conley." You're like, "I knew you'd enter that
Yeah.
way. That is something that I am okay with calling you."
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun, and like that was a big moment, and like me and my friend Nick, who went with me to go do that interview in the car, we were definitely like kind of giddy, afterwards, and we were like, it was like, man, like we just got like like Saves the Day is like a huge band, like to us, and like like we have him, and like wow, like we're actually doing it. So like that was cool.
How are you watching the footage? Like, are you going home and like kind of making notes through the footage, or are you just keeping it all to the end when you're like, all right, it's time to edit this? Like, I'm
Yeah,
just gonna
well,
watch it all now.
yeah, anything that I did before the trailer, basically, like before the Kickstarter, I've like gone through combing for bites,
Hmm.
you know, for the trailer. I've definitely watched most of it, and I've like seen most of it. Thankfully, I haven't had too many technical snafus with what I've got. Like everything I've gotten is like good.
Has there been
Um,
an oh shit moment where you're like,
oh God,
fuck,
I
I can't
probably
go
should.
back?
Well, yeah, there has been one.
You don't have to say it, just like I'm sure
Yeah,
there has. I mean,
there
after
has
that
been
many
one,
hours, yeah.
but I think I can fix it.
I think that people listening need to realize what goes into making something like this, just from a technical side. So when someone is doing this and they're doing it by themselves, this is how much time. It's first you got to reach out and you got to get them to say yes. So it's like okay, there's that part of it, and then you got to
Hmm.
set up time to go fucking see them, and then you got to bring the equipment. And you have the equipment, it takes you a while to set it up because you got the camera, you got to light it. You got to get the sound set up, and then you're recording it. You got X amount of cameras. Let's say you have two. Let's say you're just shooting with two
Yeah,
cameras. Then you have
yeah, it's two
that.
cameras.
Okay, so you got that. You have the audio going to one place, and then you got to pack your shit up, go back home, and then watch the footage. Now, when you're doing the edit, finally at the end, and granted, there's a lot of steps missing here. Then there's also there's the travel time and the flights and things like that you got to pay for. But then also when you're going through the footage, you got to go, okay, I got to rewatch the entire time we did this to pick out pieces. Then I got to craft a story. But also now when the whole fucking thing's together, you go now I got to color correct it. Now I got to sync up the audio. Like there is so much time that goes into this. I just really want to push that in front of people that it's not like you show up with your fucking iPhone and it take a little bit of a video and take another video and go, okay, I'll just put this together. There is so much that goes into this that people hopefully understand that just understand that.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely using actual skills and experience,
Yeah.
right? That I've learned from like working in like video production for like 15 years. What I would really love to be able to do is I'd love to be able to hire like a story assist or something to like watch everything and like make and do string outs and make notes, but I'll probably end up just having to do that myself, but that's fine.
Yeah.
And as far as like the post, I do post for a living, like the editing and like all that stuff. So I'm not worried about that part. Like I can handle that part.
And not saying it's you're gonna fuck it up. I'm just saying that people,
Oh yeah, no,
even if
no,
you
it's
know
time. It's
even if you know
time.
what you're doing, it is just pure time. There's not an app you can use. This is your eyes and your ears and your creativity watching shit. It's not like you watch it once, like you watch it over and over. Like 10 seconds you can watch over and over again just to nudge it just about right so the transition
Hmm.
goes just right to the next one. So there's so much time that he's gonna put into this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put in a lot of time.
What is like, and I'm gonna wrap this up soon, but what is your projected, like, what date do you want to release this?
Okay, so what I'm gonna try to do, and this might be like super ambitious, and also kind of like depends on how many of like my big fish interviews, so to put it, that I can get in this time frame. I mean, I'm gonna see how it goes, like because I'm gonna keep. I think I'm gonna keep kind of looking for like I'm gonna keep doing some like work on the producing end, if you will, and see if I could maybe pick up some like additional investment, just like like traditionally, to just be able to like augment like what I can do like as I'm doing it. But let's just say that that's not going to happen. I'd like to have something out by this summer. I'd really like to get it out in 2020, just because of a like I don't know how many times I've heard people who I know who've like, yeah, I did a doc and it took me like 3 years. you know, I mean, I'm gonna do everything I can to avoid being one of those stories where like it just kind of just drags out for years, like because I'm doing it on the side or whatever. Because I mean, obviously, like something else that I want people to understand is like this definitely isn't like my job now. Like like
Yeah, you got to
I'm doing
balance.
this.
You got to.
Yeah,
This is
like
your free time with two kids.
yeah. I basically I have kind of I've kind of like made arrangements where I'm basically going to dedicate myself to this till like the end of March, and I'm going to basically get as far as I can there, working like full time on it, and then I'll have to go back to work. um, and then I'll keep working on it. But at that point, my goal is to be in this like editing phase, in which which is something that I can do just like on nights and weekends,
Yeah.
like on my own time. It's really the production that I need to have like the flexibility to be able to go meet people when they're available and like schedule stuff and, be able to travel. I'm going to be doing some trips. I'm going to New York, New Jersey, and probably Boston too for like a day or two at the end of January. I definitely want to go to Nashville because a lot of people live in Nashville now. Who, like music people from the scene live in Nashville now. Yeah, I'm going to try to get all that done basically in the next couple months.
It's crazy.
And then we'll get into post. On the plus side, I'll have been there. So I know like what happened and like what they said. So like it's not like I haven't seen any of this and I have to like sit and like watch it from scratch like completely. But you definitely do, like when you talk to somebody for like an hour and a half, let's say, you like rediscover like little nuggets of things they said that like you don't remember.
Oh yeah.
And then just figuring out like how to weave the narrative all together. I'm definitely going to go like chronologically from a storytelling standpoint, kind of like set up the different like regional scenes individually and like how they started and like, like who was involved there. And then thinking like mile markers in the narrative could be like when landmark albums came out that kind of like brought like a new, like Clarity could be one. Jimmy, the Bleed American, Through Being Cool, Full Collapse, Thursday, and use those moments as like markers where like the scene gets like propelled upwards.
Yeah.
And then kind of just, like tell what happened and then go, through its like peak where it made its way onto MTV with bands like Fall Out Boy and Yellow Card, New Found Glory. And then basically like the middle of the decade when all of a sudden, quote unquote, emo became kind of like a uniform more than a
turtlenecks and all that shit.
Yeah, like a music,
Yep.
It just got like over commercialized, like, and then kind of what happened next. And then, so like the Kickstarter, like, what I'm going to concentrate on first and what I kind of set up in the Kickstarter, if like you read it carefully, is I'm going to make like basically like part one, because I'm pretty sure that I could make like an actual finished product of part one, which is like the roots up into the point where it starts to like, where like it's going to break out, like mainstream, because those are the things where like I can definitely get photos, home concert footage from people. People have been like, I got so many emails and messages on Facebook and stuff from people like, I have all these photos, like look at the, and people like sending me like these like awesome photos from shows they took, and like it's really cool, and people want to be involved, and I want to make something that like the fans want to see and something that the artists want to see too, like I want to tell their story, and I want it to be about music,
Yeah, I mean, even the best thing about this too is just the power of YouTube. You can finish the doc and you have extra footage of interviews. I mean, you can literally launch the whole fucking thing on a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had, because that would just between subscribers and then just having someone watch that for a certain amount of time, it would just, I mean, it would also keep the thing going over how many ever years. Just people, it's just like linking to that. But if people are looking up Chris Conley interview and it goes to YouTube and it's the full one, or it's the pieces that you like kept out of the doc and it's just all there. I mean, you can just upload it and be like, here it is, just one shot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah, I have options, like the the fact that like would it be great if like if like Netflix or Amazon or Apple
or Disney Plus,
if they were like, we love this, Kyle, here's $500,000, and, like, wow, great, then I wouldn't own it anymore. Like they would let me make it because they wouldn't want to like take on that responsibility. They would let me do that, but then once it was made, it's like, or like once they saw it, then all of a sudden it's like it becomes theirs in like a lot of ways. So right now it's like completely mine, and it's completely, and therefore it's completely what like the actual fans of this want to like want to see, and like what they want to hear about. Yeah, we're doing it.
All right, man. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up because I also do have to get back to doing freelance work. All right, so two questions. This one seems completely obsolete because the whole interview is about this. But what do you want to promote?
I have a YouTube covers channel. No, yeah, just promote the doc. Like you mentioned, the Instagram, which is where I'm basically doing all my updates. I do have a Facebook page as well, but I haven't really done anything on that Facebook page. So sorry, for my Facebook followers. I'll try to get some stuff on there too.
You get a lot of engagement on there. Like I was just looking at it. Like you get a lot of people commenting and liking posts. That's really good. That's gonna get more people to see it.
Yeah. So the Facebook is if you just search for the Last Scene documentary, or just at the Last Scene doc, both on Facebook and Instagram. If you just search for those, it'll pop up. You can follow us. I post photos every time I interview somebody, and then I kind of post stuff randomly. And then we have a website too, thelastscenedoc.com, which has the trailer on it. There's like an about section where I kind of tell like a truncated version of like my story and like why I'm doing this. I could definitely come up with some more like interactive kind of stuff, but like I said, like social media is not my strong suit. So if anybody wants to volunteer out there to like be my social media manager, hit me up. And then you can help me do that and like get some more stuff out there, like interactive stuff.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. So last question:
Mm-hmm.
what scene ethics do you still hold on to this day?
That's kind of complicated because like I wouldn't consider myself. I mean, yeah, like I was there, but it's not like I was in a band or like even was like a roadie for like a band or whatever. Like
No, it doesn't have to do with like you technically doing something as a band. It's like what did you learn about going to shows or going to
yeah.
punk shows? Like I think you said it a lot throughout this whole piece. I just think you just don't. If you just thought about it, you'd pretty much narrow it down.
Yeah. So I guess like the scene ethics that I've kind of tried to carry on is like to be open to hearing new music, is one thing. To want to go see live music, and if you can go see maybe a band that you've never heard of, versus just only going to see bands that you already heard of. That's like a big thing now. It seems like, I don't know. I know there are bands out there, right? There must be, like, I know they are, but like, fuck if I know where they're playing though. Like some band that I haven't heard of before. It seems like whenever you see a show, like everything, like it seems like now there's already kind of, in order to play a show that people are going to hear about, you have to already like be at a certain level. And like, I don't know how bands get there now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because what you used to do is like you used to build that up from just going and playing shows. I would say going to see live music, paying attention to the music and like listening versus just kind of like tuning out while maybe the opening band is on, because who knows, like you might like discover a new band or hear a song you like, or maybe they talk in between the songs and like they say something that kind of like strikes a chord with you, or I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's it, because I can't really claim to be, like I was there, but I wasn't really like there, so I don't want to be too presumptuous. But as far as somebody who like goes to shows, I would say just like go to shows and be present. And if you feel like going in the pit, go in the pit.